Lieutenant Commander Abigail Winters stared at the radar screen. She had been stationed at Outpost Sentinel for 3 years now, and nothing interesting ever happened this far from Earth. The outpost floated silently at the edge of our solar system, watching the stars. "Commander, you might want to see this," said Officer Ben Clark, his voice unusually tense. Abigail moved quickly to his station. On the screen, an unknown object was moving toward them. It wasn't following any known flight path of human ships. "How long has it been there?" she asked. "Just appeared, ma'am. It's sending out some kind of signal." The signal wasn't like anything they had heard before. It repeated in a pattern that seemed almost like words. "Get Captain Garrison," Abigail ordered. Her heart beat faster. This could be it. First contact with alien life. Captain Samuel Garrison arrived minutes later. He was a tall man with gray hair who had seen everything in his 30 years of service. Or so he thought. "Is it still there?" he asked. "Yes, sir. And we're starting to decode the signal. It seems to be a distress call." The alien ship came closer. It looked damaged, with parts of its hull torn open. It was unlike any ship design humans had created, curved like a sea creature with glowing blue parts. "Open a channel," ordered Garrison. "This is Captain Samuel Garrison of Earth's United Fleet. We receive your distress signal. How can we assist?" The screen flickered, and they saw aliens for the first time. They had pale blue skin and large eyes. They looked almost human, except for the ridges on their foreheads. "We thank you for your response," said one of the aliens in perfect English. "I am Commander Zex of the Varlaxian scout ship. We are refugees fleeing from the Krax Dominion. Our ship is critically damaged. How are you speaking our language?" Abigail asked. "We have studied your transmissions for some time," Zex replied. "We hoped we would find friends if we ever met." Captain Garrison ordered the outpost bay doors to open. "We offer you shelter and repairs." The alien ship docked smoothly despite its damage. Garrison, Abigail, and a security team went to meet their visitors. 5 Varlaxians stepped out of their ship. Up close, they seemed even more human-like. They bowed slightly. "The Krax Dominion has destroyed our world," Zex explained as they walked toward the command center. "They consume all in their path. We narrowly escaped." "How far away is this Dominion?" Garrison asked. "Far, but they are always expanding. Your world might be safe for now," Zex said. In the command center, Abigail noticed something odd. The aliens seemed more interested in the outpost systems than in medical attention or food. "Captain," she whispered, "I think they're scanning our defenses." Before Garrison could respond, the aliens moved with sudden speed. Zex grabbed the nearest officer and held something against his neck. "We apologize for the deception," Zex said, his voice now cold. "The Krax Dominion rewards those who find new worlds to conquer." The alien ship suddenly powered up, its damaged appearance fading like a disguise. "You were never damaged," Abigail realized. "No, and now the Dominion knows about Earth. They will come, and you cannot stop them." Alarms blared as the outpost systems were hacked. Garrison lunged for the emergency lockdown, but one of the aliens shot him. He fell to the floor. Abigail dragged the captain behind a console as chaos erupted. The aliens were downloading everything about Earth's defenses. "Get to the escape pod," Garrison whispered, pressing a data chip into her hand. "This has everything about the encounter. Earth needs to know." Abigail didn't want to leave him, but she knew her duty. She crawled to the emergency shaft while security officers fought the aliens. The last thing she saw was Zex smiling as he sent a signal to someone far away. Then she sealed the escape pod and launched toward Earth. Behind her, Outpost Sentinel exploded in a ball of fire. As her tiny pod raced home, Abigail knew humanity had just faced its first contact with alien life. And it had gone terribly wrong. Abigail Winters stood before the United Earth Fleet High Command. 6 admirals sat at a long table, their faces grim. Her escape pod had reached Earth 3 days ago, and she had spent every minute since then explaining what happened at Outpost Sentinel. "So you believe these cracks aliens will attack Earth?" asked Admiral Gregory Hayes. He was an older man with a stern face and more medals than anyone else in the room. "Yes, sir. Based on the data we gathered, and what the Varlaxians said before they attacked, I estimate we have less than 6 months," Abigail replied. The room fell silent. Earth had ships, but nothing that could fight an alien empire that crossed galaxies. "Our current fleet would not stand a chance," said Admiral Hayes. "We need more ships." "We don't have time to build enough ships," argued another admiral. "Even if we used every factory on Earth and the Moon, we couldn't match the numbers the cracks will bring." A woman at the back of the room stood up. She wasn't in uniform, and Abigail didn't recognize her. "Perhaps we don't need more ships," the woman said. "Perhaps we need one impossible ship." Admiral Hayes sighed. "Everyone, this is Dr. Olivia Martinez. She's a physicist who works on unusual projects." Dr. Martinez walked to the front of the room. She had dark hair pulled back in a tight bun and wore simple glasses. She didn't look like someone who would suggest impossible things. "I've been working on what I call the Paradox Project," Martinez explained. "A ship that exists in multiple dimensional states at once." The admirals looked confused. One laughed. "You want to build a ship that breaks the laws of physics?" he asked. "The laws as we understand them," Martinez corrected him. "The Varlaxians clearly have technology beyond our understanding. We need to think beyond what we believe is possible." "This is a waste of time," said another admiral, standing up. "We need real solutions, not science fiction." As the admirals argued, Commander Eric Duncan watched from the side of the room. He had been quiet until now, but something about Martinez's idea caught his attention. "How would this ship work?" Duncan asked, interrupting the argument. Martinez smiled. "In theory, it could appear in multiple places at once. Fire weapons that hit before they're fired. Move without actually crossing the space between 2 points." "And you can build this?" Duncan pressed. "With the right team and resources, yes," Martinez said confidently. Admiral Hayes shook his head. "The Defense Council will never approve such a project. They'll want us to build conventional ships, even if it's hopeless." The meeting ended with orders to begin building more standard ships. As everyone filed out, Duncan approached Abigail and Martinez. "You really think this could work?" he asked Martinez. "It's our only chance," she replied. "But Hayes is right. They'll never approve it." Duncan looked at both women for a long moment. "What if we don't ask for approval?" Abigail's eyes widened. "You're suggesting we build this ship in secret. That's treason." "I'm suggesting we save humanity," Duncan countered. "I have access to an abandoned research facility in the Rocky Mountains. It was used for classified projects before the military budget cuts." Martinez nodded slowly. "I would need specialized equipment, materials that technically don't exist yet, and a team we can trust," added Abigail, surprising herself. She was always one to follow rules, but after seeing the outpost destroyed, something had changed in her. Duncan lowered his voice. "I can gather resources without raising alarms. Dr. Martinez, can you make a list of the scientists we would need?" "I already have names in mind," Martinez said. "People who won't think it's impossible until after we've done it." Abigail looked at both of them. "If we fail, we'll be court-martialed." "If we fail," Duncan said grimly, "there won't be courts left to marshal us." As they left the building, the setting sun cast long shadows across Earth's capital. 6 months to build an impossible ship. 6 months to save humanity. Abigail wondered if Captain Garrison would approve of what she was about to do. But deep down, she knew there was no choice. The cracks were coming, and Earth needed a miracle. The abandoned facility deep in the Rocky Mountains had once been used for top-secret weapons testing. Now it was home to the most daring project in human history, Duncan had managed to bring in equipment piece by piece, using old contacts and calling in favors. Dr. Martinez stood in the center of the massive underground hangar, directing the placement of strange machines. Around her, a team of 12 scientists and engineers worked day and night. Each one had been carefully selected and brought here in secret. The quantum particle harvester needs to be closer to the core framework, Martinez called out. We can't have any spatial distortion in the collection stream. Chief Engineer Darius Kelly wiped sweat from his dark forehead. He had been skeptical when Duncan first approached him, but seeing Martinez's equations had changed his mind. This would be easier if we weren't building with materials that don't technically exist, Kelly muttered as he adjusted the machine. That's the whole point, Martinez replied. The ship needs to draw matter from between dimensions to create a shell that exists in multiple states simultaneously. Abigail entered the hangar carrying new supplies. After 2 months of work, the skeleton of their impossible ship was taking shape. It didn't look like a normal spaceship. Its hull curved and bent in ways that hurt the eyes if you looked too long. Any progress on the core stabilization? She asked. Kelly shook his head. Every time we try to activate it, the energy patterns collapse. We're missing something. A young officer named Lisa Rodriguez approached them. She was their newest recruit, brilliant with computer systems. Dr. Martinez, I think I found a solution to the targeting system problem. If we link it directly to the quantum core, the weapons could lock onto targets across multiple dimensional planes. Martinez smiled. Good work. Add it to the design. They all looked up at their creation. They had started calling it the U.S. Impossibility as a joke, but the name had stuck. It shimmered slightly, as if it wasn't quite fully in their reality. 2 more months until the first crack scouts arrive. Duncan said, joining them. Will we be ready? Martinez didn't answer immediately. The truth was, they were behind schedule. The quantum core was unstable, the dimensional shifting technology barely worked, and they had yet to find a way to shield the crew from the effects of existing in multiple dimensions. We need to solve the core stability issue, she finally said. Without that, nothing else matters. That night, as most of the team slept in the makeshift quarters they had set up, Martinez stayed in the lab, staring at her equations. Something was wrong with the fundamental approach. She didn't notice Lisa Rodriguez watching her from the doorway. Rodriguez slipped away quietly and went to a secure communication station hidden in a storage closet. They're still struggling with the core, she whispered into the communicator. I don't think they'll succeed in time. A voice answered, keep watching. We need to know if we should divert more resources to conventional defenses. Rodriguez nodded. Yes, General Pearson. The next morning, a massive explosion rocked the facility. The quantum core had become unstable during a test. Equipment was damaged, and 2 scientists were injured. We can't keep doing this, Kelly said as they assessed the damage. Each failure puts us back days we don't have. Martinez stood silently, looking at the damaged core. Then suddenly her eyes widened. We've been approaching this all wrong, she said. We're trying to force the quantum particles to remain stable in our dimension. What should we be doing? Duncan asked. We should be allowing them to exist naturally across all dimensions and anchor our ship to them instead of the other way around. Her hands moved quickly as she began drawing new diagrams. Kelly, we need to rebuild the core framework completely. As they worked on the new design, Duncan received an urgent message. The deep space monitoring stations had detected ships entering the solar system. They weren't the main Cracks fleet, but scout ships had arrived earlier than expected. We're out of time, he told the team. The impossibility needs to launch, ready or not. They all looked at the half-finished ship. It was their only hope, and it wasn't ready. It won't be fully functional, Martinez warned. It doesn't need to be perfect, Abigail said. It just needs to be impossible enough to surprise them. The U.S. Impossibility rose from the underground hangar into the night sky. It didn't look like any ship humans had built before. Its hull shimmered and seemed to fade in and out of sight. Sometimes it looked solid, and other times you could almost see through it. Inside the bridge, Commander Eric Duncan sat in the captain's chair. Abigail Winters stood at his right as second in command. Dr. Martinez was at the science station, her fingers flying over the controls as she monitored the quantum core. Core stability at 67%, Martinez reported. Not ideal, but it should hold. All systems online, said Chief Engineer Kelly from the engine room. Though I'm not sure I'd call them working exactly. Duncan looked at the small crew around him. Besides the 4 of them, they had only 5 other volunteers. The minimum needed to operate the ship. Everyone else had stayed behind to cover their absence and continue work on backup plans. Set course for the outer solar system, Duncan ordered. Let's find those crack scouts. The impossibility moved forward, but not like a normal ship. It seemed to blur, and suddenly they were miles from where they had been. No one felt the movement. What just happened? Abigail asked, looking at the navigation screen. The quantum drive is working, Martinez said, excitement in her voice. The ship exists in multiple places at once, so when we choose a location, we're already there. They reached the edge of the solar system in minutes rather than days. The sensors detected 3 cracked scout ships near Neptune. They haven't seen us yet, Abigail said, checking the sensor readings. Actually, they probably can't see us at all, Martinez explained. We're shifting between dimensions too quickly for their sensors to lock on. Duncan leaned forward. Let's test our weapons. Target the nearest scout ship. Kelly's voice came over the comm. Weapons are online, but they're strange. The quantum energy has affected them in ways we didn't expect. Fire when ready, Duncan ordered. The Impossibility's main cannon fired a beam of energy that glowed with an impossible light. But the strange thing was that the cracked ship exploded before the beam even left the cannon. What just happened? Duncan asked. Martinez checked her readings. The quantum weapon exists across time as well as space. It hit the target before we fired it. The other 2 cracked ships began to move, firing wildly into space, trying to hit something they couldn't see. They're scanning for us, Abigail reported. Move us behind them, Duncan ordered. The Impossibility shifted again, appearing behind the enemy ships. This time they fired conventional torpedoes. Both Crack's vessels exploded. A cheer went up on the bridge, but it was cut short when one of the crew members suddenly collapsed, screaming and holding his head. What's wrong with him? Duncan asked as Abigail rushed to help. Martinez ran a scanner over the fallen crewman. Dimensional sickness. His mind can't handle existing in multiple realities at once. 2 more crew members began to show similar symptoms. They became confused, seeing things that weren't there. We need to reduce the dimensional shifting, Martinez said, moving quickly to adjust the core settings. If we do that, won't we be visible to enemy sensors? Duncan asked. Yes, but if we don't, the entire crew will suffer brain damage. Duncan nodded grimly. Do it. As Martinez reduced the quantum field, the ship settled more firmly into normal space. The sick crew members began to recover, but a warning alarm sounded. The core is becoming unstable again, Kelly reported from engineering. We pushed it too hard too fast. Can we make it back to Earth? Duncan asked. If we're careful, Kelly replied. But we can't fight again with the core in this condition. Before they could set course for home, Abigail called out, Captain, I'm picking up a transmission. It's encrypted, but it's definitely cracks. They all listened as the computer translated the alien language. Main Fleet, this is Scout Group Alpha. Humans have unexpected technology. Accelerate invasion timeline immediately. Duncan looked at his crew, their faces pale in the dim light of the bridge. They're coming sooner than we thought, he said quietly. We need to get back to Earth with this information. The Impossibility turned toward home, its quantum core flickering like a candle in the wind. They had won their first battle, but the war was just beginning. and it was coming faster than anyone had prepared for. The U.S. Impossibility landed at a secret military base outside of Washington, D.C. Armed guards surrounded the ship as soon as it touched down. Admiral Hayes was waiting with a stern look on his face. "Commander Duncan, Lieutenant Commander Winters, you are both under arrest for stealing military resources and operating an unauthorized vessel," Hayes announced as they exited the ship. But before the guards could move, a tall woman in a business suit stepped forward. "Stand down, Admiral. The President wants to speak with them immediately." Hayes frowned but nodded to the guards. "Ms. Allen represents the President's office," he explained. Inside a secure conference room, Duncan and his crew sat at a long table. On a large screen, the President of the United Earth Federation looked at them with interest. "I understand you've built quite the remarkable ship," the President said. "One that successfully engaged crack scouts." "Yes, Madam President," Duncan replied. "But we also learned the crack's main fleet is approaching faster than expected." The room fell silent. Then the arguments began. Military leaders wanted to take control of the impossibility. Scientists wanted to study it. Politicians wanted to use it as a symbol of hope. "The ship needs its original crew," Dr. Martinez insisted. "It has somehow bonded with us at a quantum level." Admiral Hayes shook his head. "That's impossible. A ship can't bond with its crew." "With respect, sir," Kelly added, "everything about this ship is impossible. Yet here we are." Despite their protests, the President decided to place the impossibility under military control. A new captain was assigned, Captain Frank Miller, a decorated officer with 30 years of experience. "Captain Miller will lead the defense efforts with your ship," the President declared. "You will all serve as advisors." Duncan wanted to argue, but knew it would be useless. As they left the meeting, Abigail pulled him aside. "This won't work," she whispered. "Miller doesn't understand the ship." "I know," Duncan agreed, "but we have to try." Over the next week, Miller prepared the impossibility for battle. He treated it like any other ship, ignoring Martinez's warnings about the quantum core's unique properties. During a training exercise, Miller ordered conventional battle maneuvers. The ship tried to follow orders, but the quantum core began to destabilize. "Captain, we need to reduce power," Martinez warned from the science station. "The core can't handle these kinds of maneuvers." "I've commanded ships for 30 years, Doctor," Miller replied coldly. "I'll handle the tactics." Suddenly, warning alarms blared throughout the ship. The quantum core was collapsing. Reality seemed to bend around them as the ship tried to exist in too many dimensions at once. "Shut it down," Miller ordered in panic. "I can't," Martinez shouted back. "It's not responding to anyone but Duncan." They had no choice but to call Duncan to the bridge. As soon as he entered, the ship seemed to calm down. The alarms stopped, and the core stabilized. In an emergency meeting afterward, Martinez presented her findings to Admiral Hayes. "The ship has imprinted on its original crew. It recognizes us at a quantum level. When Captain Miller gives orders, the ship tries to interpret them through conventional physics, which destabilizes the core." Hayes looked skeptical. "You're saying this ship is alive?" "Not exactly," Martinez explained. "But it exists partially in dimensions where our thoughts and intentions have physical form. It responds to those who understand its nature." Before Hayes could respond, an emergency alert sounded. A fleet of crack ships had been detected passing Mars. They would reach Earth in less than 24 hours. The President called another emergency meeting. "How many ships do we have ready?" she asked. 43 combat-ready vessels," an admiral reported, "against hundreds of crack ships." All eyes turned to the impossibility, their only hope. After a long silence, Hayes spoke. "Commander Duncan, I'm returning command of the impossibility to you and your original crew. God help us all." As they headed back to the ship, Abigail looked at Duncan. "Can we really do this? One ship against an entire invasion fleet?" Duncan had no easy answer. The fate of Earth now rested on an impossible ship and its exhausted crew. The Krax invasion fleet appeared in Earth's sky like a swarm of metal insects. Hundreds of warships, each larger than anything humans had built, blocked out the stars. Earth's 43 ships looked tiny in comparison. Inside the U.S. Impossibility, Duncan sat in the captain's chair. His original crew was back at their stations. They had slept only a few hours in the past 2 days, but adrenaline kept them alert. "All systems are as ready as they'll ever be," reported Kelly from engineering. "Core stability at 89%, added Martinez. "Better than before, but still not perfect." Abigail looked at the sensor readings. "The Krax fleet is spreading out to surround Earth. Our ships are moving to defensive positions." Admiral Hayes' voice came through the comm system. "Commander Duncan, we'll engage the enemy and draw their fire. Your mission is to target their command ship. Without leadership, their attack may fall apart." "Understood, Admiral," Duncan replied. He turned to his crew. "This is it. Everything we've done has led to this moment." The Impossibility moved forward, its hull shifting between states of reality. On the main viewer, they could see Earth's conventional ships engaging the Krax fleet. Explosions flashed in the blackness of space as human ships were destroyed one by one. "We need to do something more," Duncan said, watching another Earth ship explode. "Martinez, is there any way to push the quantum drive further? Make us exist in even more dimensional states?" Martinez hesitated. "Theoretically, yes, but the risks would be extreme. The core might collapse completely, or the dimensional shifting could damage our minds beyond repair. If we don't try, Earth falls today," Duncan said simply. Martinez nodded and began working on her console. "I can modify the quantum field to create multiple versions of our ship across more dimensions. We'll appear to be in many places at once." "Do it," Duncan ordered. As Martinez made the adjustments, the ship began to vibrate. The view outside the windows became strange, as if they were seeing everything through multiple layers of reality. "It's working," Martinez said, her voice strained. "We now exist across 7-dimensional planes simultaneously." To the Krax fleet, it suddenly appeared as if there were 7 Impossibility ships attacking from different directions. Their targeting systems couldn't lock onto any single version. "Fire all weapons," Duncan ordered. The Impossibility's weapons struck from impossible angles. Krax ships exploded as quantum torpedoes hit them from directions that defied normal space. On the Krax command ship, their admiral watched in confusion as his fleet was attacked by a ship that couldn't possibly exist. In rage, he ordered all ships to focus fire on the strange human vessel. Hundreds of Krax weapons fired at once. Most shots passed through empty space where the Impossibility appeared to be but wasn't, but some found their mark. The ship shuddered as hits connected across multiple dimensions. Warning alarms blared. "Core stability dropping," Kelly shouted. "Down to 45%. Martinez suddenly screamed and collapsed at her station. Blood ran from her nose and ears. "What's happening?" Duncan demanded as Abigail rushed to help Martinez. "The dimensional strain is too much for her mind," Abigail explained. "She's experiencing all 7 dimensions at once." Another hit rocked the ship. Panels exploded on the bridge. "Core at 30% and falling," Kelly reported. "We can't take much more of this." Abigail looked up from where she knelt beside the unconscious Martinez. "Eric, I'm detecting something strange. The damaged quantum core is creating some kind of tear in spacetime." Duncan looked at the readings. The ship's damaged core was indeed ripping a hole in reality itself. Most captains would see this as a disaster, but Duncan saw something else. A weapon. "Can we control where this tear appears?" he asked. Kelly checked his readings. "Maybe. If we redirect power to the navigational deflectors, we might be able to aim it." The ship took another hit. The lights flickered. "Core at 18%, Kelly warned. "We're running out of time." Duncan made his decision. "Set a course directly for the heart of the Krax fleet. We're going to use this tear as a weapon. As the impossibility turned toward the center of the enemy armada, the space-time tear grew behind them like a wound in reality itself. The fate of Earth now depended on one damaged ship and its desperate gamble. The impossibility flew straight toward the center of the Crack's fleet. The space-time tear followed behind it like a glowing wound in reality. Crack's ships that got too close to the tear simply vanished, pulled into some unknown dimension. The tear is growing faster than I expected, Kelly reported from engineering. His voice was strained. Core stability at 12%. We don't have much time. Duncan looked at the unconscious Martinez. She was the only one who fully understood how the quantum core worked. Without her, they were flying blind. Abigail, set a course for the Crack's flagship, Duncan ordered. If we're going down, we're taking their leaders with us. The impossibility phased through enemy fire, sometimes being hit and sometimes not. The ship shuddered with each direct hit. Core at 8%, Kelly warned. Systems failing across the ship. Duncan made a hard decision. All crew to escape pods. Now. Abigail looked up from her station. What about you? Someone needs to pilot the ship to the flagship, Duncan replied. And someone needs to stay with Martinez. She can't be moved in her condition. Let me stay, Abigail argued. You've got family back on Earth. Duncan shook his head. That's an order, Lieutenant Commander. Get our crew to safety. Reluctantly, Abigail helped the remaining crew members to the escape pods. Kelly was the last to leave. It's been an honor, sir, he said, saluting. The honor was mine, Duncan replied. Now go. Make sure they know what we did here. After the escape pods launched, Duncan was alone on the bridge with the unconscious Martinez. He took manual control of the ship and aimed directly at the massive Crack's flagship. Core at 5%. The computer announced. Collapse imminent. The impossibility accelerated toward the Crack's flagship. Energy weapons bounced off or passed through the ship as it phased between dimensions. Duncan looked at the approaching flagship. It was massive, easily 10 times the size of the impossibility. As they got closer, he noticed something strange. Computer, analyze the Crack's flagship's energy signature. Analysis complete. Energy signature shows temporal distortion consistent with quantum field technology. Duncan understood immediately. The Cracks had their own version of quantum technology. That's how they traveled between stars so quickly. As the impossibility approached the flagship, Duncan had an idea. If both ships used similar technology, perhaps they could create an even bigger effect. He adjusted course slightly, aiming for the flagship's engine section. The impossibility phased partially out of reality, allowing it to pass through the flagship's shields. Core collapse in 10 seconds, the computer warned. Duncan turned to look at Martinez. To his surprise, her eyes were open. The loop, she whispered, blood still trickling from her nose. Create the loop. Duncan didn't fully understand, but he trusted her. He directed the failing quantum core to interact with the Crack's flagship's engines. When the two quantum fields touched, something impossible happened. Time itself seemed to fold. The impossibility and the Crack's flagship were caught in a moment that kept repeating. From the escape pods, Abigail watched as a strange bubble formed around the Crack's fleet. The ship's inside seemed to freeze, then move backward, then freeze again. They were caught in a time loop, unable to move forward in time. Earth's remaining ships stopped firing, watching in awe as the entire Crack's fleet became trapped in the time bubble. 1 month later, Dr. Olivia Martinez opened her eyes in a hospital bed. The dimensional exposure had nearly killed her, but her mind had adapted in strange ways. The ships, she asked immediately. Abigail, sitting beside her bed, smiled. Still frozen in the time loop. The scientists say it could last for centuries. And Duncan. Abigail's smile faded. We don't know. The impossibility is inside the loop too. He could be trapped in that same moment forever. Martinez sat up slowly. Maybe not. I saw something while I was unconscious. The ship exists in multiple dimensions. In some of them, he survived. What does that mean? Abigail asked. It means, Martine said, looking out the window at the stars, that impossible things can happen. And somewhere out there, in another dimension, the impossibility is still flying. 3 days later, Earth scientists detected an unusual signal coming from the edge of the solar system. It was brief and partially corrupted, but they managed to decode one short message. Still here, still impossible. We'll find a way home. The message was signed, Captain Eric Duncan, U.S. Impossibility. Somewhere between dimensions, the impossible journey continued.